It is my absolute honor and privilege to start our annual meeting of the Alumni Association right now. Before I begin, I'd like to make a special mention of some things that went on this weekend that I am very proud of, particularly the 10th anniversary of the Days Masala Center. Our choir reunion, and the all-year Kirkland reunion, where we get to celebrate the charter class. I have had so many firsts as president. Well, one just being the first Black woman to be president, but also, you know, presidency over Zoom and and all sorts of other things that happen on campus that I had to step up into leadership and lead you guys. And so it is my absolute honor to represent the 20,000 plus of you. So I want to thank all of you for being awesome and giving me that opportunity. I'd also like to recognize some of our outgoing chairs on our alumni council, and if you wouldn't mind standing and indulging me so that people can see who you are. Tucker Hutchinson, our chair of regional. Paul Reichert, chair of the Hamilton Career Network. Alexandra Stevens, chair of nominations. Adriana Payne, class leadership, and our incoming Alumni Council Vice Chair. So in 4 years, it's gonna be you. And Natalie Sanchez, the chair of our Equity and Inclusion Committee. Thank you all for all the hard work you've done over the last 2 years. You made my job really easy because you were an awesome committee, so thank you. So typically during this meeting, we do a lot of business. There's a lot of announcements. There's a lot of, you know, back and forth discussions about what we did as a committee. I'm not doing any of that. Right now, we're just here to celebrate one another and give some people some acknowledgement that is well-deserved. So I am going to bring up Alexandra, who is the chair of nominations, to talk about the 2022 winners of various awards.
Thank you, Josie. Good afternoon. I'm Alexandra Stevens, class of 95, and I'm here today to deliver my final committee report as outgoing nominations chair. At our spring meeting, the nominations committee is charged with selecting the recipients for both the 2022 Distinguished Service Award and the Jeff Little Class of 71 Volunteer of the Year Award, as well as awarding college keys. The Distinguished Service Award recognizes a current employee who substantially contributed to Hamilton through distinguished job performance and through involvement in student, alumni, or other activities in the college community. This spring, the nominations committee has chosen Monk Rowe to receive this year's Distinguished Service Award. Professor Rowe is the founder and director of the Phileas Jazz Archive and lecturer in music performance. His contributions to America's understanding of the history and culture of jazz is impressive, having interviewed over 300 jazz artists and preserving their memories in video and transcript. He organizes and sponsors a series of concerts featuring some of the most talented jazz musicians of our time at both Hamilton reunions and fall coming events. And finally, he is a talented lecturer in music performance, leading the jazz ensemble and inspiring hundreds of students in the pursuit of their music education at Hamilton. For these reasons and many more, the Nominations Committee awards Professor Monk Rowe the 2022 Distinguished Service Award. The Nominations Committee has chosen the Jeff Little 71 Volunteer of the Year Award recognizes a volunteer who has made a substantial and lasting contribution to the college. The awardee may be an alumnus, alumna, parent, or friend of Hamilton. This year, the nominations committee has chosen Paul Reichert, class of '90. In recognition of his 30 years and counting, he's not going away, of significant volunteer service to Hamilton. There's almost nothing that Paul hasn't done for Hamilton. He has served as a member of the Washington, D.C. Regional Planning Committee, then becoming its chair and eventually becoming chair of regional affairs. He has hosted alumni events at his home and his office. He has served on the Reunion Gift Committee for his 5th, 10th, 15th, and 25th reunions, and on the Planning Committee for his 30th virtual reunion. He is completing a 4-year term as the inaugural chair of the Hamilton Career Network, in which he helped to conceptualize, develop, staff, and formally launch the initiative. Paul's vision, leadership, and collaborative spirit is the reason for HCN's incredible success to date. He has also served as artist in residence for the college's Alumni Relations Department, creating original artwork for use on invitations and for gifts. Those great Hamilton cartoons that you see, those are all Paul. He's even convinced his wife, who is not a Hamilton graduate, to hire Hamilton alums in her PR firm in DC. On a personal note, it is my distinct pleasure to have worked with Paul in various capacities since 2006 and have thus witnessed firsthand his immense dedication to our college. So it brings me great joy that the nominations committee has selected Paul as the 2022 Jeff Little 71 Volunteer of the Year Award. Checking on name pronunciation. Finally, the nominations committee has selected 4 alumni to receive College Key Awards, which are given to those who have performed a service or activity that directly benefited a specific volunteer program or the college. Our first College Key recipient is Nancy Ross, Kirkland 71. I don't know if she's here. Nancy volunteered to design and produce an exquisite commemorative Kirkland Everlasting Eternity Ring. The ring appropriately symbolizes the Kirkland community, which continues to connect, engage, and renew its relationship with the Hill. Our next recipient is Parker Riel, class of '88, for his enthusiastic promotion of the Hamilton Fund and the Chapel Bell Society. Parker's various social media campaigns, I don't know if you saw the one where he was in his bathrobe, strongly and directly influenced the college's overall solicitation strategy, both driving the Chapel Bell program to new heights and landing Parker as the top advocate on Give Day and the current Springboard Challenge campaign. Our third College Key recipient is Samantha Ski, class of '94, for her reimagination of the Hamilton pitch competition over the last 2 years. Working with fellow judges and mentors, Sam served as the competition's primary volunteer driver, re-envisioning the competition into a year-long program. She also served as the EMC for the finale on April 1st. Her work completely revitalized the pitch competition, and Sam will continue to fine-tune the competition in the coming years. Our final College Key Awards go to a group of people: Stephen Larson, class of '03, David Hornblower, class of '86, Greg Selch, class of '88, and Leslie Carroll, class of '87. These 4 alumni were instrumental in organizing support for the new boathouse and making this dream become a reality. They provided insight into the history of the program, connected alumni and rowing families, lent their support, and encouraged others to do the same. They participated in ongoing conversations to instill a better understanding of the need and benefit of a new facility would provide to Hamilton's rowing program, as well as harness their energy to bring alumni and current rowers together for a fabulous new boathouse dedication ceremony just 4 weeks ago. Please join me again in congratulating all of the recipients of the Spring Alumni Council Awards. And please, Paul's in the room. I'm not sure if anybody else is, but please remember to keep this information confidential because I need to contact these people first before anyone tells them that they are award recipients. And just a couple of final comments. I wanted to thank Beth Conway, class of '05, and Peggy Malloy-Gart, class of '01, who will be rolling off the admissions committee with me. Joining the committee will be Natalie Sanchez, class of '07, Paul Reichert, class of '90, I said he was not going away, And Liz Menges, class of 84, parent 12 and parent 17. My classmate Laura Engelhart will be assuming the role of chair, and Neil Basu, class of 01, will serve as her vice chair. I want to thank Laura for all of her thoughtfulness, and her skills as a mediator have served this committee very well in the past and will continue to do so. I'd also like to thank the committee members with whom I've served, and my fellow executive board members, and those college officers with whom I've worked closely during my time as chair: Dick Tantillo, Sharon Rippey, and Lori Dennison. I have served on the Alumni Council for the last 18 years in various capacities, all enjoyable, but I particularly loved working with NomCom because it epitomized the Hamilton College experience: collaboration, debate, critical thinking, flexibility, and intellectual growth were hallmarks of every meeting for me. And of course, in the true Hamilton spirit, we worked exceptionally hard during the meetings on campus or on Zoom, and then we played even harder at the pub, after them. It has been a privilege to be in the room where it happens for the last 6 years, and I know that Laura and Neil will do a fantastic job going forward. Thank you.
So, thank you, Alex. Oh my gosh, this is really emotional for me because I didn't think I was going to ever be in this position as a scrawny kid from Brooklyn. And there was a number of folks who believed in me and pushed me and helped me to be here. And so to see how my life has changed over the last 20-something plus years is amazing, but I feel like all of our lives have changed so much. And so being back and acknowledging all these people means one, we're still here, but two, we recognize that this is a very special place. So I hope the rest of the time that you're here, you get to have those kind of moments where you feel just as emotional as I do, because this is home. Anywho, I want to bring up my fellow exec board members so that they can get their awards. So, come on up. Tucker, Paul, Alex, Adriana, Natalie, I kid you not, this could have been so much harder if it wasn't for all of you. You are amazing. You do so much for the school in ways in which I can't even put into words. So it is my honor to give you guys college keys. Thank you for your service. Please share them on. Be a little louder. They do a lot of work for you. So now, thanks you guys. So now I get another honor. Oh, Phyllis. Okay, I get to announce our Distinguished Service Award for Phyllis Breland. Let me read the citation. A 1980 Hamilton graduate, you were the first female class speaker at commencement and the first woman tapped for Pentagon. But your impact on College Hill was just the beginning. For nearly 2 decades until your retirement in 2020, you were the director of the Opportunities Program. And this is not in the citation, but she was also really instrumental in allowing my daughter to have time here on the campus and supporting me in ways that I can't begin to thank you for. So thank you so much for all that you do. Okay. In that role, you provided one student, as one student describes, the selfless love and guidance and the knack to know what I needed. And that is so true. You received, sorry. I'm gonna do it again. Okay. You provided what one student described as the selfless love and guidance and the knack to know what I needed, and that you received from your beloved mentor, Christine Johnson, AKA Miss J. when you were a HEOP student yourself. You had a gift, the student said, for providing what students needed to hear, not just what they wanted to hear. Your influence has been felt on campus and off. Professionally, you served as president of 2 organizations focused on higher education opportunity programs and received the Arthur O. Eve Lifetime Achievement Award at HEOP's 50th anniversary conference in 2019. On campus, in addition to directing the opportunity program, you were at various times interim chief diversity officer, director of the Days Musolo Center, and a posse liaison. Your alumni leadership roles included mentor and reunion planning chair for the Multicultural Alumni Relations Committee, class of 1980 reunions planning chair, and numerous roles on the Alumni Council. In 2021, you were nominated and elected to serve a 4-year term on the Board of Trustees. Phyllis is passion, said a HEOP classmate and Hamilton colleague. This embodies her. She is who she is. When fellow classmates established the class of 1980 Phyllis Holmes Breland Scholarship for high-need Hamilton students with a preference given to those in the college's opportunity programs, it ensured that your impact as a Hamiltonian would last for forever. My hope, you said at the time, is that I have laid out a path and an expectation that reinforces the faith and hope that we give our students by having this program here. Today's recognition is the most recent of several you have received for your contributions to Hamilton. In 2015, your peers nominated you for the Tobin Award for Exemplary Service and Commitment to Hamilton. And 4 years later, the senior staff honored you with the Eli Wertimer Patsy Cooper Award. Today, your fellow alum bestow you with the Distinguished Service Award for substantial contributions to the college through distinguished service and job performance throughout your time as a student, alum, and other activities in the community. It is my humble pleasure and honor to give you this Distinguished Service Award.
Thank you. It doesn't get any more genuine and sincere than that. My heart thanks you. I want to tell you a little story about the first formal meeting that I attended at Hamilton. And it was in the chapel. And that was when we used to introduce all new employees to the college community. And Gene Tobin was the president, and he was standing up, and they were calling names, and I bust in, and I ran down the aisle, and I said, Marilyn Monroe, right here. And I knew if they could accept that, they could accept me. And I just have to thank you for taking me as I am, encouraging me to continue as I am, expecting that I'll be who I am, and simply loving me. Thank you. Okay, so somebody got
Yes. So now it's my pleasure to introduce President Whitman to give us a few remarks.
Well, good afternoon and welcome everyone, or perhaps I should say welcome home. You know, after watching the concert last night, I couldn't help but wonder whether the curtains might open with a giant flashing banner, but maybe next year. I want to begin by congratulating two of my favorite Hamiltonians, and one you just saw honored. Phyllis, you know, it's been my absolute pleasure and privilege to work with you closely for the last 6 years, and I look forward to continuing to work together on the Board of Trustees. Thank you for everything you've done for the college. And I'm going to jump the gun a little bit and say, Gordon, I'm thrilled that you're being recognized this afternoon. Can't wait to hear your remarks. It's always one of the highlights of my year. And I want to give a special shout out to the Kirkland College president, Sam Babbitt, who earlier today received the Alumni Association's highest honor, the Bell Ringer Award. Congratulations, Sam. And I want to thank all of the reunion participants for returning to campus this year, even if the calendar insists that your reunion was actually last year, or perhaps the year before that. But we at Hamilton are not bound by little niceties of chronology. We like to do things our own way. I want to give a special congratulations to the Kirkland College Charter Class of 1972, Pathbreakers all, who are celebrating their 50th reunion this year. Congratulations. Some Hamiltonians think that Dick Cooper, class of 1944, got it right when he said, "A class reunion is when everyone gets together to see who is falling apart." You all look like you're doing pretty well, though, and there's nothing to make you feel younger than a class reunion, even if it does make you wonder how your classmates could possibly appear so much older. All of us understand that our alma mater cannot remain frozen in time, that it cannot and should not stay exactly as it was when we graduated. But even so, it's natural when you return to campus after some years away to feel a little surprise and maybe even a little disappointment to discover that the college has, in fact, changed. Alexander Wolcott, a 1909 graduate and prominent literary critic, noted that when he returned to the radiant hillside 90 years ago, an observation about the current students. The present generation of undergraduates, he said, has a rather more luxurious life than we knew. This seems to be a common sentiment. Wolcott's predecessors undoubtedly could have said the same thing about his class. After all, his classmates did not have to bathe in the Oriskany Creek. They didn't have to attend chapel at 6 a.m. every morning to hear a lecture from the president, a tradition that has been discontinued, though whether to the greater relief of the students or the president is unclear. And they didn't have to take a stagecoach to get to Utica, which the earliest Hamiltonians did. Now, I suspect that many of you, on coming back to campus, seeing the incredible beauty of the campus, the extraordinary facilities, the remarkable caliber of the faculty, and the range of services that we provide to our students, may have concluded, as Wolcott did, that today's students have a rather more luxurious life than you knew at Hamilton, even if the stagecoach service has been discontinued. Even our present students are not immune from the temptation to judge the present by our memories of the past. I had lunch in Commons last fall with a group of sophomore RAs, and I asked them, "How are your first-year charges doing?" "Oh," said one, "this new generation of students, they are so much less mature than we were." Well, this was followed by some animated discussion, after which we all agreed that, in fact, they were the same generation, But the students also all agreed that they were indeed far less mature. Well, what a difference a year makes. But then, what a year, or more accurately, what a couple of years. In March 2020, as we all now know, a novel coronavirus was circulating in the United States. We didn't know what it would mean. We sent our students home for spring break, optimistic that we would be able to bring them back 2 weeks later. That didn't happen. On March 17th, I had to send an email, a heartbreaking email, to the community, letting them know that we would be conducting the rest of the semester by remote instruction. 3 things stand out for me from that moment. First, our students showed extraordinary resilience and grit. So whatever you hear about students today, remember this. For our seniors in particular, this was a disappointing moment. The loss of their senior spring, the abrupt end to athletic competition and other activities, the lack of an in-person commencement, all were hard to accept. We made them a promise then. We said that when the time came, we would bring them back to campus to celebrate with all the pomp and circumstance they deserved their 4 years at Hamilton. And last week, we kept that promise. It was a wonderfully joyous occasion. They were thrilled to be back for what I think is now the traditional 2-year reunion. And they are all thriving, which tells you something about grit and resilience. Second, the Hamilton community responded to a crisis with speed, skill, and a commitment and dedication to our students that I have not seen anywhere in over 30 years of higher education. In less than 2 weeks, the faculty put the entire curriculum online, a Herculean effort. Staff from across the campus partnered with Student Affairs in order to make sure that all of our students got home safely, including those who were abroad, and that all of them had the technology, the resources, and the access to remote services to enable them to succeed even through remote instruction. And third, we learned that online learning, no matter how well it is done, is no substitute for the in-person, engaged education that Hamilton provides. So when many colleges and universities, including all of the Ivy League with the exception of the one in Ithaca, New York, decided to continue with remote instruction that fall, Hamilton decided to reopen in person. We set up a testing center from scratch and tested everyone in our community 3 times a week. We reserved dozens of hotel rooms for isolation and quarantine space. We tasked teams of people to do contact tracing and support our students with COVID. We put up miles of plexiglass. Okay, not every decision was a good one. We revamped all of the classrooms and created new ones in order to allow for physical distancing. We turned the field house into a dining hall. We built new modular housing to reduce density in the residence halls. And we had every student sign a community standards agreement to govern life on the Hill. And then we held our breath. Everywhere I went, I heard people taking bets. And the bets were that we would not last a week, certainly not more than 2. Well, 2 years later, we are still in person, and we are going strong. The strains of the past few years have taken a toll on students, faculty, and staff alike. Mental health issues already at crisis levels before the pandemic have continued to escalate. The always-on culture of smartphones and social media continue to serve as persistent stressors, and the divisiveness of contemporary politics is felt here as it is everywhere else. When you read stories about campus culture that alarm you, I urge you to remember, however luxurious student life may seem by the standards of the past, remember our students face some daunting challenges, which they are learning to negotiate just as you had to learn to do in your day. When I became president in 2016, I was given a beautiful Hamilton robe, a nice cane, and a lovely medallion. But I was not given a crystal ball. So I don't know what's going to happen with the pandemic, and I don't know what other challenges we will face. But here's what I do know. In the summer of 2020, a faculty member asked me why Hamilton was opening in person. What she asked, do you know that the presidents of Harvard, Yale, and MIT do not? My response, I know Hamilton. I know our community. I know our students, our faculty, our staff, and our alumni. And I know what they can do individually and collectively. So whatever challenge comes, I know we can weather it together. And that's how it's worked. The class of 2026 is already on its way. With record high applications and a record low acceptance rate, it's going to be one of the strongest and most diverse classes in Hamilton history. We continue to recruit extraordinary new faculty and senior administrators. As you know, Vice President for Academic Affairs and Dean of the Faculty, Suzanne Keene, has left Hamilton to serve as the 10th president of Scripps College. And Vice President for Student Affairs and Dean of Students, Terry Martinez, retired this past May. It's difficult to lose such talented, experienced, and effective leaders. But we've recruited a wonderful new Dean of Faculty, Ngoni Monimo, who comes to Hamilton from Williams College, which, as one of our trustees observed this morning, is the only blemish on his record. I plan to announce Terry's successor next week, and we are also searching for a new Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, the first time we will have had that position. It's a search I hope to conclude soon. As always, we continue to renew our facilities to meet the needs of our students, faculty, and staff. And the most symbolic representation of that commitment is this building, which reopened last fall after a $3.1 million restoration, which included extensive renovation of the steeple, a new slate roof, repair of the masonry tower, clock, and bell. Now, I'll admit this was not inexpensive, but we suspected that if we let the tower simply snap off, someone would notice. We also continue to update academic and student life programs. This year we launched ALEX, a cutting-edge advising network, and we are working on a digital gateway to make certain that our graduates, and possibly even the president, can learn to use the data and analytic tools that define and power the modern workplace. And we continue to raise funds to keep Hamilton at the forefront of liberal arts education. The Because Hamilton campaign sits at $360 million, on our way to our $400 million goal as we enter the last year of the campaign. As you know, your service and your philanthropy are what make all of this possible. From scholarship aid to the digital gateway, you make everything happen here, and we are grateful for that. As we enter the final year of the campaign, the fundraiser in me is tempted to quote President Kennedy's famous line, which I think went, "Ask not what Hamilton can do for you, ask what you can do for Hamilton." But instead, I am going to say with heartfelt emotion, thank you. Thank you for everything you have already done for the college and for what I know you'll continue to do. I want to conclude my remarks with one more recognition. Well, actually, I don't want to, because it means saying goodbye to Josie Collier as president of the Alumni Association. Although, as I've already warned Josie, we love to reward hard work and service to the college by giving that person more to do. Josie, on behalf of the college, thank you for the indispensable role you have played these past few years. In addition to all the traditional responsibilities you have performed as Alumni Association president, you helped our 23,000 alumni stay connected and engaged when a global pandemic forced us to turn our in-person events, including reunions, into virtual programs. And if that wasn't enough, you co-chaired an advisory council to recommend actions that would accelerate the work already being done at Hamilton to create a more welcoming and inclusive community. As I know from personal experience, that 15-member council met every week for 10 months, often for hours at a time. Its success is directly attributable to your outstanding leadership. And I want to thank you personally for serving as a counselor and advisor to me and helping me get through some really difficult moments. You will always have my gratitude. Finally, thanks to you, members of the Alumni Association, for all the important work you have done, are doing, and will continue to do for our extraordinary college. Carissima.
Man, how do you top that? So, thank you, President Whitman. I really appreciate your kind words. It's a labor of love in many different ways, but also an important one, and it needed to be done. So if not anyone, why not me? So next, I'd like to introduce Rory Radding to read our half-century class analyst letter. Please pay attention, don't disappear. I know these things have been long, and I thank you in advance. So, Rory.
I'm so glad they don't have a 25th analyst letter as well, otherwise we'd be here all week. This is I'll try to be a little brief. I don't know how much it's going to take. I call this a tale of the times, of our times. This is the fourth 50th analyst letter this weekend. I apologize for any overlap, but I promise you that this is the last one you will hear this weekend. I also appreciate your patience, indulgence, and especially your stamina. President Whitman, my fellow classmates from the class of 1971, those of 1970 and 72, and all the other reunion classes and friends and family. First, I thank my classmates for all the memories and tales of our days on the Hill, some of which many of us would rather forget. Second, I thank the college for its unbridled support in gathering some of the information long lost to the recesses of the brain, which is easy when you get our age. Third, I thank the 3 other analysts from the companion classes for making my job easier and harder at the same time. It's easier because you already heard everything about what went on during our college years, and it's harder because you've already heard what went on in our college years. Fourth, I thank President Whitman and his predecessors who, with our deans and dedicated faculty, have continued to devote themselves to teaching at the highest level over the past 50 years, maintaining Hamilton as a truly world-class institution. Delivering the 50th analyst letter is a humbling honor for a chemistry major who constantly had Professor Briggs practically rip up his freshman yes essays. The only saving grace was required speech, where I, as well as others in our class, learned the fine art of public speaking from professors like Todd and Mumbles Carlson. How we ever learned anything from Mumbles Carlson was amazing. A skill, along with writing, that has served me well as a technology lawyer over the years. In looking back and reflecting on our 50-plus years, the opening of Charles Dickens' Tale of Two Cities kept coming to mind, particularly in our current times. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epic of belief, it was the epic of incredulity. These words seem to describe most times, regrettably, but I felt they are apt in today's context as reflecting the ups and downs in society, politics, economics, technology, and culture, as well as in the conduct of our own lives. So here we are, 51 years after 195 of us graduated, and 55 years after 234 of us matriculated as young freshmen from varying backgrounds, beliefs, and socioeconomic upbringing in an era of turmoil, war, hot and cold, and a looming recession to a new era today of technological marvels, but still turmoil, war, hot and cold, and if not looming recession, certainly a period of economic uncertainty. Does anyone remember the Hamilton ad in Time magazine in August 1967? It had the statement, quote, "A lot of people would like to see us build a factory here, superimposed over a photo of this very chapel." When asked by the Spectator about the ad, acting President Cooper said, quote, "The college needs money," close quote. A far cry from today, with our very strong endowment, we just heard about a $400 million goal, our class was no small part of making this happen. What was it like back during our 4 years together, and how did our years at Hamilton mold us into who we are and who we became? Could our success be based on the many roles to women's colleges, to gin and juice parties during house parties, to the isolation on top of a hill where the snow of the long winters only melted to create the muddy paths of late spring? Is the college motto, know thyself, that propel us? Is it the eclectic nature of a liberal arts education? Or maybe all of the above and then some? About a third of us were on an athletic team. Many of us were members of the choir and active in Charlatan, Spectator, student government, and a host of other activities. We were required to have distribution requirements totaling 27 semester courses for 2.5 years. Those requirements softened a bit during the President Chandler years when he introduced the Williams system, talk about Williams, to Hamilton. Interestingly, over our 4 years, we had 3 presidents, perhaps a reflection of the times we lived in of change. That Williams system had 3 periods, a fall semester, a January semester or month, and a spring semester. Remember January study? Does anyone remember January study? I recall several of us took the study period very seriously at various women's colleges, such as Skidmore, which offered unique academic courses interspersed with weekly private co-ed skiing outings in the area. Luckily, January study was pass-fail. Others found themselves in other parts of the country and world having created their own January study, such as an economic study of communal living in Hawaii. Strange to pick that locale for a January study and miss the beauty of 5-foot snowdrifts in sub-zero winter. Hamilton has grown and flourished since our days here. The chapel is still reaching skyward, as is the tuition, as the choir song, When Alexander Hamilton, reminds us. The college has changed in significant, beneficial ways. Fraternities are now dorms, and new buildings populate the campus, like the Kennedy Center, the Wellen Museum, the Little Pub, and the William Cross lacrosse field. And I must digress and thank Kevin from that other class, Jeff, Jack, and Jaime, and all of our classmates for their generosity and loyalty over the years. Jeff has been so loyal to Hamilton that in addition to the pub and squash courts, he hired 23 Hamiltonians. Some became his partners. He proposed to his wife at a house party and has been a trustee forever. And he's probably, I think he is, Alexander's distant cousin. Unlike the Hamilton of our freshman year, we are truly a mature co-ed institution, and Kirkland, that women's school in the apple orchard behind ELS, is now Hamilton, as we learned earlier today. Speaking of Kirkland, its presence had a large influence on campus and academic life at Hamilton. Perhaps you can say a more humanistic approach. For others, it eliminated drives back to campus with a bleary-eyed classmate at the wheel and snoring classmates in the back seat. For some at Hamilton, Kirkland's existence expanded the curriculum to embrace more social concerns and the arts and created several long-lasting marriages, like those of Anthony Bernini, Marty Crisworth, Jim Morgan, Robbie Ritter, and Hugh Sampson, to name a few. Several of us even had weddings in this very chapel. Today's Hamilton has a very diverse student body, but not to say it wasn't diverse during our years, at least from a geographical perspective. It was a different kind of diverse. We came from 21 states and 12 countries, with 17 foreign students. 158 of us came from public schools, and 76 from private schools. Most of us came from several counties in New York State, upstate, downstate, many of us from the New England states and states in the Northeast. The other day, I was looking through our class Meet the Freshman book. Remember that book? We saw some of the pictures earlier today. Or Funny Book, or should I now say Facebook? Is that appropriate? It was fascinating to see where our classmates came from and then look at where they ended up after 50 years. As I mentioned, most of us came from the Northeast. But there were a few of us from other states and countries, but not many. A few were Midwesterners. How they got over here, I'll never know. Like John Beck from Wisconsin, Tom Cooper from Ohio, my former roommate at Dunham, Steve Thomas from Iowa, and the unforgettable John Layler, who we don't talk about much, from Indiana, may he rest in peace, among others. Then there were a few from our western states, like Larry Bentley from California, who I recall gave a graphic talk in my speech class on the physics of surfing that I remember every time I go sailing and try to avoid a sandbar. A couple of us came from Alaska and going south, Virginia, Florida, Puerto Rico. I know I missed some people and some states, but you get the idea. We came from a lot of places. Luckily, we had several classmates from Canada, thank God, like Dave McCart and Mike Thomas, without whom our hockey team might not have made it to the ECAC finals. To fill out the Western Hemisphere, there was Humphrey Polanin from Suriname, which I had to look up when I met him. I had no idea where Suriname was, but it was previously Dutch Guiana in South America. We were truly international with foreign students from Iceland, Scotland, England, Cyprus, Greece, Colombia, Cameroon, Peru, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, and I probably missed a few. Quite a melting pot, I must say. David Crippen was a Watson Scholar from Scotland and only spent 1 year on the Hill with us, but remembers Hamilton fondly. As he recently wrote, quote, "Looking back, I am intensely grateful for the experience," close quote. He in fact credits our fine professors and their teaching skills, especially those of Professor Kinnell, for his long-lasting depth of knowledge of organic chemistry, despite his career in physics. Today, it's actually true. He still remembers everything about organic chemistry, which is remarkable for a former chemist. Today, the college attracts students from the four corners of the US and the globe, made up of all races, religions, and genders. Samuel Kirkland would be very proud of this school now. What was the setting for our 4 years? We've heard a number of this in the other class analysts, but bear with me. When we arrived in 1967, the Vietnam War was gearing up and starting to hit its stride with almost 500,000 US troops. 3 Apollo astronauts had died in a fire. Elvis got married, and Thurgood Marshall was appointed to the Supreme Court. A gallon of gas was 33 cents. Gold was pinned at $35. The Dow was at 800, a far cry from where it is today, although we might get there the way things are going. As freshmen, we lived in the blockhouse known as Dunham, which was not quite Stalag 17, but certainly had several of its attributes. To entertain ourselves, among other things, we used Dunham's halls for slap shots and other deeds not to be spoken or remembered. Of course, winter brought us natural refrigeration with beer storage on many windowsills. We had a very creative class that freshman year, and Dunham was our canvas to the chagrin of Dean Depew. In 1968, there was the Tet Offensive. Soviet tanks invaded Czechoslovakia. Now that sounds pretty familiar, doesn't it? The Democratic Convention, we all remember that. Jackie Kennedy married Aristotle Onassis, and 3 scientists won the Nobel Prize for something called DNA. Who knew? Then we had a spate of assassinations with Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy. Nixon became president, and importantly, O.J. won the Heisman Trophy long before he won his criminal trial. In 1969, we landed on the moon with one giant leap for mankind, and remarkably, the New York Jets won the Super Bowl, and the Mets won the World Series, all in 1 year. That was probably the best year they ever had. 400,000 people held a love-in at Woodstock, and then we had a draft lottery, as we've heard, with many, if not all of us, huddled around TV sets waiting for our numbers to be called. That was fun. While we were huddled in front of fraternity TVs for the draft lottery, certainly with a beer in hand, Jeff Little remembers watching it in what I'll call the Hamilton Cool style at Professor Ed Lee's house over cocktails. Quite a way to watch the lottery, but civil. Suddenly, there was a large increase in pre-med students at Hamilton. especially those with low numbers. For those with high numbers, it was probably the only lottery they ever won. The idyllic hill became a refuge of sorts from the everyday reporting of Walter Cronkite on fighting in the jungles and paddy fields. In 1970, the U.S. carpet-bombed and invaded Cambodia. Then there was the 1970 March on Washington, with carloads of Hamilton students, including some of our classmates, going on a different kind of road trip to our nation's capital. The campus was closed and final exams postponed. Perhaps not surprisingly, Patton won the Academy Awards. I need to digress for a moment. Mike Clausen was a founding member of the Semester in Washington program that I believe had just started in 1969 or 70. I can't get the date straight. He vividly recalls the March on Washington and giving shelter to protesters tear-gassed at DuPont Circle, where he and Frank Anacarico lived. When I look back on Mike's distinguished career, the movie Forrest Gump came to mind. Mike may have been our version of Forrest Gump, always in the middle of living history and current events, and in the room where it happened. Besides the march in 1970, he was at the handover of Hong Kong, assistant to various secretaries of state, involved in several touchy international issues, some to be spoken of, some not, and as U.S. ambassador to Cyprus, among other posts. Finally, when we graduated in 1971, the Pentagon Papers had been published, China joined the UN, Nixon said he would withdraw 100,000 troops from Vietnam, moon rocks were brought back, Texas Instruments made the first pocket calculator, and Joe Frazier beat Cassius Clay before he became Muhammad Ali. Gas was now 40 cents, and the Dow reached the then unheard of height of almost 1,000. The dollar no longer pegged to gold at $35, floated. It looks like Dickens foresaw not only our first 4 years, and as we now know, the 50 that followed. Whatever side of the political spectrum you may find yourself, Nixon influenced our years at Hamilton. Steve Baker, as president of our student body, was invited, along with 4 other college student presidents from around the country, to visit the Oval Office and discuss student reaction to Cambodia with President Nixon. Steve recalls Nixon asked the students what they were thinking. Steve, a Hamiltonian through and through, did not mince words, but was certainly respectful. He succinctly responded, quote, "Students are wondering what country we are invading today and how we can beat you in 1972. That takes guts. I think Steve's political career may have ended right then and there. I'm not sure how Nixon reacted, but I am aware that Steve never ran for higher office, although he did have a successful career in the U.S. military and civilian life. It seemed the military beckoned several members of our class, voluntarily and regrettably involuntarily. John House, an Army colonel and preeminent military historian, credits the struggle we all had in trying to obtain yes essays in English 11 and the writing skills he thereby achieved with his successful career in the military as an intelligence analyst for the Defense Intelligence Agency, and the praise he received for polishing PowerPoints for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and finally as a professor of military history at war colleges for senior officers, teaching many of our generals over the ensuing years, including General Petraeus. John also reminded me that we had a French table at Commons where only French was spoken. I have to admit I don't remember that, but it was an interesting occasion. I am not sure I recall the French expression for food fight or mystery meat, but I am certain the food did not meet French culinary standards. Of course, the current events of the day did not discourage us from rolling to the several women's colleges, from Keuka to Cazenovia, Smith to Skidmore, Wells to Wellesley, among others. How many of us remember staying a night at the Rip Van Dam Hotel in Saratoga? As a member of the choir, I was fortunate to be introduced to the choir tour, what in essence was a college-sponsored road trip to sing at various women's colleges in the Northeast, with concomitant socializing while making beautiful music together, I might add, before, during, and after the concert. In Hamilton tradition of that era, certainly not politically correct by current standards, we spiked the punch at some of the finest women's colleges in the Northeast. The longest road trip the choir took was the summer after our freshman year, under the guidance of the legendary Professor Fankhauser. I don't know if you recall Fankhauser, but he was a bald man with a beard, and he was phenomenal as a conductor. A 5-week, 5,000-mile European choir tour with the women from Oneonta. In fact, we were invited by Oneonta. As reported by The Spectator, one Oneonta co-ed, quote, cooed, close quote, end quote, after our concert with Hamilton in November, we had it the year before, we were all left wishing we could tour with Hamilton, and now everyone is happy. They kicked out the University of Rochester for us, so that was quite an achievement. We sang for the U.S. ambassador to Italy, in 16th century castles in Switzerland, beer halls in Bavaria, deemed illegal since 1945. You couldn't sing in these beer halls, but we did, and a host of other unique European venues. We made long-lasting friendships, both male and female. Also, Hamilton attracted an outstanding but somewhat unique, and some would say eccentric, administration and faculty. Teaching was the priority. We were fortunate to learn from Professors Briggs, Blackwood, Craddy, Kinnell, Markey, Spooley Ellis, Potter, Lewis, Lindley, Gerscheider, Paul Parker with his art slides course, Bullfinch Richardson, Sotomayor, Sid Wernimer, coaches Weber, Long, von Schiller, Bott, Patrick, Jones, and McDonald, as well as, we've heard about him, the enigmatic Professor Mattingly, who held class on ancient civilization in his home living room on College Hill Road, with warm cookies and milk supplied at a break by his adoring wife. And then there was the very theatrical Professor Barrett, who took several of us for 20 plays in 20 days in London. I know I missed some professors, but every one of us had our favorites who inspired us and helped us achieve our goals, even if it were just to graduate. We also had our favorite courses. I was reminded of one that seemed to exemplify how Hamilton taught critical thinking. Remarkably, although we were on the verge of a technological revolution and computer age 50 years ago, we did not have any courses on computer science, except it was the philosophy department that taught computer programming as a part of the course in logic through a time-shared terminal with an IBM mainframe at the Griffiths-Sack Air Force Base. Can you imagine the door that would open to a hacker today? But that course gave us a strong foundation for the computer age unfolding before us. Moving to our deans, stories about Dean Tolles are legendary. His penchant to relieve himself in the Root Hall bushes, I didn't witness that, so I'm not sure, but others have. His rumpled suits and other endearing, colorful tales. Yet with all his uniqueness, one thing stood out: his matchless loyalty to Hamilton, its students, and his colleagues, as well as his infectious enthusiasm for all things Hamilton. This latter quality demonstrated during the nocturnal triumphant return by the Continental Hockey Team in March 1968 after defeating Colby at the ECAC semifinals in Maine. The team was returning by Mohawk Airlines. If you remember, President Peach, he was a Hamilton graduate, so he flew everyone over and back. The team was returning by Mohawk Airlines to Oneonta County Airport. As the plane taxied, you could see President Chandler and Dean Tolles running on a snowy tarmac. Yes, I said Dean Tolles was running along with a few hundred Hamilton students, which must have been quite a sight. For those of you who do not recall Dean Tolles, he was a rather portly man, and the image of him running alongside Hamilton students towards the plane in the early morning on the slippery tarmac was truly inspirational. Our victorious 1967-68 hockey team was apparently, up to that time, the best team in Hamilton's history, with our own Greg Bott, Dave McCart, Robbie Ritter, Mike Thomas, and Jeff Little. I guess slapshot practice in Dunham helped. Does anyone remember when we played West Point? We heard that earlier, but it wasn't our finest hour, but it was a great game, a hell of a game. Our baseball, basketball, football, swimming, cross-country, track, and lacrosse teams also held their own. We had several outstanding players, but two from our class stand out. Tom Carr not only received the Jean Marius Gates Memorial Prize for Outstanding Athlete at Hamilton, but also was chosen as an All-American miler. Mike Thomas, likewise, was chosen as an All-American in hockey, even though he's from Canada. Quite an achievement. Quite an achievement from Tom and Mike in a small liberal arts school in the hills of upstate New York. Then there are the stories about mandatory chapel, where all of us heard announcements of the week about events and issues at the school. I believe it was there that we were indoctrinated into the Hamilton cool tradition of snapping fingers instead of clapping. Thank you. There was no internet or social media, only the spoken word on an early morning. Dean Depew would come to the podium. All assembled would hush. The dean started off the festivities with a tongue lashing about student behavior. But then when Dean Tolles came to the podium, the hush evaporated into a cacophony of sound. Dean Tolles, of course, would then forget what he wanted to say, tell a series of jokes or anecdotes, and then sit down to thunderous applause. When Sid Werdemer went to the podium to speak, students would all yell, "Stand up, stand up." He was a shorter man, about my size, I think. Sid may have been short in stature, but he was a giant in the impact he had on so many of our lives. Speaking of Dean Depew, one of our classmates reminded me of a story during the first year or so of Kirkland. As occasionally happened, the college would mount a surprise fire drill every so often targeting one of the dorms in the wee hours of the morning. One such occasion in 1968, the North Dorm was the victim. When the alarm sounded, all left the sanctuary and sleep of their rooms to gather on the lawn. Dean Depew surveyed the scene and found Hamilton sophomores and juniors, but also some young women from Kirkland. The dean, apparently satisfied with the result of the fire drill, was heard to utter, "All right, men, back to your rooms. And women, back to wherever you belong." A supermajority of us were members of fraternities, which by senior year had dwindled to about 2/3. Of course, house parties, those testosterone-driven rituals 3 times a year for 4 years, were memorable not only because of the Four Tops, we've heard about these, the Richie DeHaven, Sly and the Family Stone, Sha-Na Na, and the up-and-coming new group Chicago, but also because of the significant education we received on how to handle a hangover using the gin and juice remedy the next morning at Chi Psi or Theta Delt. I am not sure Dr. Rowe, and we've learned his name really was Death Row, approved. How he survived is anyone's guess. Theta Delt had perfected the remedy to such a degree that it was featured when The Sterile Cuckoo by John Nichols was filmed on the Hill in the fall of 1968. We've heard a little bit about that during this weekend. Or remember that Liza Minnelli, then a young 22-year-old daughter of Judy Garland, became a denizen of the campus for a few days. She was nominated for an Oscar as Best Actress for that movie. Some of us became extras. One extra from our class, Peter Salisbury, probably after one too many a gin and juice, recalls asking Liza to be his date at a teak party. Can't make this stuff up. She graciously declined, having just married Peter Allen, who's famous boy from Oz, who turned out to be gay, and she divorced him. As Peter Salisbury tells it, he figures if he had the date with Liza, he might have been her second gay husband. The college will screen the movie tonight. Do not miss the Theta Delta porch scene unless you do not want your spouse to see your native self and primitive instincts. The scene exemplified the Hamilton cool. While Walter Cronkite filmed the world in turmoil in Vietnam, civil rights, drugs, protests, and the like, Hamilton hosted the filming of a party scene at Theta Delta. We all hope that our conduct during these quarterly bacchanals was lost in the mist of memory. However, one memory seems seared into the recollections of many of us. SciU was noted for its house parties. Many a would-be astronaut would try their hand at flying through windows or just flying through the air. Bill Wright recalls watching John Stahl do a half-gainer free fall down the stairwell and unceremoniously land by straddling the balcony below. Ouch. Life on the Hill sometimes did reflect what was happening in the rest of the country. Many of us became Hamilton's version of hippies, from long hair to experimenting with various substances. I will not go into the various substitutes for alcohol that found their way to the Hill, but I do recall the Fangitos parties, secluded in the woods between Hamilton and Kirkland. They were our version of Woodstock. For many, I believe, the memory of those parties went up in smoke. It wasn't all partying at Hamilton. Who cannot forget the Ruth Jessup lecture series? Two notable speakers come to mind from somewhat divergent perspectives. Timothy Leary, who regaled us on the wonders of LSD, and Ralph Nader, who encouraged us to act in the public interest. Both expanded our minds in their own way. Many of us attended Robert Kennedy's speech in Utica in October 1967, several months before he was assassinated. After his speech, as was our tradition, the group of Hamiltonians in attendance, probably up in the loft, in appreciation, they probably only could afford up in the loft, in appreciation, the group of Hamiltonians in attendance, fingers snapped in appreciation. Kennedy looked up at the group and recoiled in surprise with a bewildered expression on his face, apparently from what he had just heard. He was overheard to blurt into a hot mic, "What the hell was that?" Or should I say, "What the hell was that?" You know, it would not be fitting to leave out the several dogs that inhabited the campus. Patches seemed to be everywhere at the same time. But Patches was not the only memorable dog. There were others. There were 195 of us at graduation. Although former Interior Secretary Stuart Udall gave the commencement speech on the future of the environment, it was Harvey, Kurt Reed's yellow lab retriever, who will always be remembered. As you may recall, Kurt gave the weekly chapel morning announcements. Harvey was his loyal companion who helped Kurt keep everyone awake by performing at chapel in the spring of 1971. Kurt called it Trick of the Week. One such trick was Harvey taking Dean Depew's hat off. Another was Harvey catching a Frisbee thrown by Fred Enderman from the organ loft. But Harvey's ultimate trick was at graduation. While all of us were seated in the sage rink, waiting patiently for our names to be called and receive our diplomas, Harvey, having dodged guards, entered the sage rink. Kurt whistled so Harvey could find him. Kurt was called to receive his diploma from Dean Tolles, who also called Harvey's name. When Kurt and Harvey approached the bottom of the stage, Professor Lidke, he was the Grand Marshal with ceremonial mace in hand, tried to block Harvey, to no avail. The assembled went wild. Professor Lidke tripped, and Harvey ran to Kurt's side on stage just as Dean Toll was handing out his diploma. Harvey was just in time to leap up and grab Kurt's diploma midair like catching a bone. With diploma in mouth, Harvey leapt off stage. Later, the Utica Daily Press reported on graduations in the area. Quote, "At Colgate, students walked out on Defense Secretary Robert McNamara. At Hamilton, a dog graduates." Now that is the epitome of Hamilton cool. So what did we all become? Dave Paris and Frank Anacarico joined the Hamilton faculty and continued the strong academic tradition at Hamilton. Several of us had distinguished careers in the medical profession as doctors, dentists, and we even had a medical examiner. We have lawyers, many noted in their own right, lots of lawyers, probably creatures of our exposure to Vietnam and the Nixon era. There are PhDs in various fields, authors, poets, venture capitalists, artists, actors, a military historian, a legislative drafter for the US Senate, NGO executives, those in public service, teachers, ambassadors, bankers, farmers, financial wizards, corporate executives, CEOs, CFOs, general counsel, judges, winemakers, art, a landscaper, musician, librarian, and even a rabbi to spiritually round out the group. Many of us switched careers during these 50 years, general counsel to poet, chemist to lawyer, bank executive to winemaker, and other career changes too many to mention. Definitely an eclectic group, to be sure. Clearly the products of a small liberal arts college and education which provided us with the tools to do whatever we wanted to do and whatever direction society and the economy took us. My 50-plus years since walking across the Sage Rank stage to receive my diploma have been forever shaped by my 4 years at Hamilton, as I'm certain yours were as well. I never thought I would be a lawyer when I graduated with a degree in chemistry, but Hamilton prepared me to do whatever I set my sights on. We have all lived through the best of times and the worst of times, as well as an age of marvels, with the advent of supercomputers that can fit in the palm of your hand, a long way from the Texas Instruments pocket calculator that was introduced during our years here, to the miracles of biotech with life-saving drugs and vaccines that slow down, if not eliminate, pandemics, which began with the 3 Nobel Prize winners for DNA. As we all look back, let's reflect on what has unfolded in our lives during those years and who we have become. From those humble beginnings in the melting pot called Dunham to the world we helped to mold and create. We were the stewards of the last 50 years. Hamilton prepared us for it. I hope history will be kind to us and look back and say, these were the best of times. The words of our alma mater, Carissima, which I often sang in choir, is apt today as it was when it was written over 100 years ago and sums up our feelings about our college. Faith shall thy constant fame uphold, while years, Carissima, grow cold. We love you, we love thee evermore, we love thee evermore. Thank you.
Thanks, Rory. The cool thing about these half-century letters now is that I know what you're talking about. The previous ones, not so much so. So now I'd like to welcome to the stage Gordon Kay, Jeff Lill, and President Whitman so that we can give Gordon his award. We're supposed to pose for a photo, I think, and then I'm going to read your citation. So, however you would like to do this. There we go. How about that? How many Hamiltonians did it take to take a photo? Okay. Let's bring it. All right, so I'm going to read the citation. You were an anomaly amongst presidents elected to office, well-loved, adored on both sides of the aisle, and fiercely loyal to your constituents, no matter the political cost. True, we're talking about serving as president of the Hamilton Alumni Association, The aisle in question is found here in the chapel, but the issues faced by your administration on the College Hill were not nearly as consequential as those debated in Washington on Capitol Hill. And those constituents I just mentioned were your wife, Susan Lewis Kay, Kirkland class of 1975, and your daughter, Sasha Hamilton class of 2005. Semantics. Your remarks at the association meetings and annual letters to alumni were informative and enjoyable, and peppered with your most amazing wit, deadpan humor, and of course, your love for your alma mater. All of that was evident in your 2017 letter when you recounted a conversation you had earlier with members of the senior class about the privileges and responsibilities of being an alum. Then, in your own special way, you urged concessions on the part of your younger constituents. Despite the years and decades that divide us, you recall telling the seniors, there is something unique and timeless about the College Hill education and experience that shapes us and that we share, and that this beautiful and dignified campus will always be home. Nevertheless, you conceded that those seniors were supremely smarter, more talented, more accomplished, more athletic, more diverse, and socially more engaged than older alumni classes could ever be. So you urged them to tone down their smarts a bit and even fake it when alumni are back on campus. We may be old, you said, but we have feelings too. See, deadpan humor and awesomeness, right? Your tenure as Alumni Association president was marked by a major revision on our organization's constitution and bylaws. And aside, this is not in the script here, but I sat in on those meetings, and your patience was beyond the call of duty. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I feel obligated to point out this action was not an orchestrated attempt to stay in power, though. As it turns out, you were the only Alumni Association president on record to serve almost 2 full terms. You have assured us that that will be only a coincidence. It is not a coincidence, however, that when one serves as president of the Alumni Association, chair of the Alumni Council, and just about every other volunteer role on college, that a person earns our admiration, our gratitude, and humbly, this is why you are the Jeff Little Volunteer of the Year.
Hi, can you hear me up there? Phyllis, I will say that at my first meeting, I also identified myself as Marilyn Monroe. It didn't work out as well as yours. I have to say that this moment is sweeter because this award is named after Jeff Little. If they tried to capture on one of these plaques all that Jeff and Claudia have meant to Hamilton, it would be too large to fit into this room. And it's sweeter because Dick Tantillo and Sharon Ritby are here, and Lori Dennison and President Whitman, all of whom have been so supportive and inspiring to me in my volunteer work and to volunteers over the decades here at Hamilton. And yet even sweeter that my wife and partner of nearly 50 years, Susan Lewis Kay Kirkland, 75, is here with me, as is our daughter, Sasha K. Walsh Hamilton, 05, who embodies the best values of Hamilton and Kirkland combined. As Susan is fond of saying, both Hamilton and I married up. And forgive me, one last thank you. I don't want to forget my classmates, Ed Watkins and Cosmo Castellano, and Betty Madonia and Nanelle Knapp, whose volunteer work for our class makes my work look like play. Okay, so in my favorite episode of The Simpsons, didn't see that coming, did you? Grandpa Simpson, known for his rambling, confusing, and often faulty reminiscences, has a fantasy. In it, he starts to tell a story, and a young boy yells out, "Hey, everybody, there's an old man talking. Let's sit quietly and listen." As an old man, this has not been my life experience. And so I will be brief. I have been forever enthralled and enchanted by Hamilton College and its unique nature and special place. Advocating, bragging, badgering, haranguing, and generally boring family members, friends, and strangers alike since I was 18. I feel pretty sure that the person who invented the emoji eyeball roll was somebody listening to me, and that the whole sort of shift of population in the society, South and West, had a lot to do with people trying to escape my Hamilton rants. Sure, there were other factors, taxes, climate change, and the like, but I think my explanation holds up best. But to be serious, I have been thinking a lot recently about why I feel so strongly about this place. A big part of the explanation, I think, is that I grew up in a distinctly immigrant milieu in Brooklyn and Long Island, post-World War II, in a family traumatized by then fresh memories of the war and the Holocaust, and extremely grateful for them to have found their way to America and what it represented: tolerance, freedom, opportunity. Education was a particularly important pathway. To make a long story very short, because I know we're toward the end of our time here, my mother learned about a small college in upstate New York that was highly regarded by people she respected and that was rumored to provide financial assistance to those in need. And we were very much in need. At the time, an on-campus interview was required and a trip was planned. Now, my ancestors were tough and resilient people, having climbed mountains, crossed seas, and faced deprivations to make it to the United States. Nothing could intimidate them except the New York State Thruway in winter. Again, to make a long story short, we nervously and tentatively made the long journey at 30 miles an hour in the family Chevy. For years afterwards, when people would ask me, how far is Hamilton from Brooklyn, I would say, with no traffic, 12 hours. In his very old age, my father started to give the advice, a man has to stay in his lane. Now, some thought he was waxing philosophical. I know he was just thinking about the Thruway. And when we got to the top of College Hill, what did we find? A beautiful and dignified campus beyond our dreams or experiences, an institution with long and strong traditions, with a proud and confident set of core values that put students first and reveled in its commitment to liberal arts, a loyal and accomplished alumni body, and lurking beneath a formidable facade, a true generosity of spirit, not to mention a generous financial package of grants, loans, and work that somehow seemed right and made everything possible. Hamilton looked and felt like the America to which we aspired. When I got home 12 to 14 hours later, I was ready to sign up. Of course, at that moment, I was a naive kid with rose-colored glasses. None of us are naive anymore. So how does this all hold up today? Needless to say, over the past few years, we have all become acutely aware that institutions and history and myths are complicated, and their meanings not always universally shared. And that is so with the college. Back in 1953, Life magazine ran a photo essay on Hamilton entitled Pure Liberal Arts. The subhead was Opening New Minds to Ageless Subjects. It was a love letter to all that was good and wise and kind and successful about America's quintessential liberal arts college. That was us, and it included a dramatic photo of the inside of this very chapel. Classic teaching, engaged students, character-building traditions. It quotes a limerick by then-President McEwen, quote, "Culture is a sweet perfume. It lingers in our locker room." Oh, and just to give you some context, we shared that issue of Life magazine with coverage of Queen Elizabeth's coronation, an editorial urging President-elect Dwight Eisenhower not to enter into any treaties with Russia, a cornucopia of kitchen appliances, an article about the first woman cabinet secretary, who we are told preferred to be called Mrs. Secretary rather than Madam Secretary, and we are assured is a, quote, efficient homemaker and takes an interest in womanly matters. Also, the magazine had no less than 3 advertisements for an undergarment called the Inflation Brassiere. Now, I was not an economics professor, but I'm pretty sure that had nothing to do with the Federal Reserve. Anyway, pure liberal arts and the best of us. But as we know from the college records and personal testimonies, and as you could glean from the Life article itself in retrospect, that period on the Hill, and many other periods as well, were marked by hard stereotypes and easy assumptions about race, ethnicity, gender, a general resistance to change, and a bad boy culture, all exacerbated by intense physical isolation. I don't mean to make light of it. The class analyst letters tell a lot of the story, but one of my very favorites was a class analyst who remembered the drinking culture of that period this way. To call Hamilton a wet campus is like saying the Atlantic Ocean is damp. It's funny, but it's dark. But it's funny, but it's dark. Now, it's getting late and I'm rambling. So let me fast forward to 2022, and here's why in a moment when it seems that America's public and private institutions and leadership are failing us, I am prouder than ever of this place. Hamilton, like so many others, could have abandoned its core values or diluted them or become complacent, self-serving, cynical. But the opposite is true, and to watch it unfold has been breathtaking. What I have witnessed in my adult lifetime, sometimes up close and personal, is that Hamilton has both endured and evolved. First, we have remained fiercely committed to the mission of student-first, pure liberal arts, and honored that commitment by amplifying and refining and refreshing its meaning. Today, we are a national force with facilities and resources and teacher scholars and a student body second to none. The best and the brightest want to be here. And as you look at the admission statistics, all 50 states, 100 plus countries, it is a place to be. We are a leading, and I would argue the leading example of what a liberal arts college can and should be. Second, in the sweep of history, we have become a more open community, open to the outside world, open to new audiences and ideas, open to each other. It has made us more tolerant, more welcoming, more accessible, increasingly diverse and inclusive in the broadest and the most expansive sense of the word. And third, we have accomplished all these things without diluting the essence of who we are, the small, personal, unique, beautiful, and dignified place that marches to the beat of its own drummer and continues to enchant and obsess families like mine. Now, after some of my talks over the years, former President Joan Stewart would roll her eyes and whisper in my ear, "You went over the top again." Joan was a demonstrative person, so she didn't need the emoji to make her point. And interestingly, she moved south as well, so more fodder for my theory. But at the risk of going over the top again, let me say this. Hamilton is not perfect, hardly perfect, but those who love it and push it forward have a rare, deep-seated, optimistic belief in its perfectibility. At a time when institutions are being tested, this is one institution that is living up to its ideals. It has been the honor of my lifetime that you have let me be a small part of it, so thank you.
That was not over the top. So, from one Brooklyn kid to another, good job. Now I'd like to welcome John Christopher up to the podium. I'm gonna officially pass over my duties to him, and it's been a complete honor and privilege to be your president. Thank you all.
President Whitman said a couple of minutes ago, well, now about an hour ago, something about saying goodbye to Josie. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm a university vice president. It's not often that we take the risk of calling our presidents out as being wrong, but as the general counsel, that's frequently what my job is to do. And so I'd like to say, we have a different message for Josie. You never can say goodbye. No, 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 no. You never can say goodbye.
I think somebody's missing their turn.
Tell me why it is so. Why don't you go? Never goodbye. No, no, no. You never can say goodbye. You never can say goodbye. Goodbye. No, 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 no. Next time, the lesson in all of this is to pick a guy from Buffers to replace you, or perhaps Special K. Yeah, the chapel dedication's at 4 o'clock, which is pretty soon. But I think, and somebody put me in charge of all the music for some reason, but I think we're supposed to end with Charisma. Does somebody want to sing that a little bit with me so that you don't have to suffer through another one of those? That would be really, really nice. All right, let's go. Where's our choir? We got a whole chapel full of a choir.